Prior to sitting down and doing Lego Serious Play, we talked about that you were going to build a goal or a challenge that you have. So do you have a goal or a challenge that's on your mind?
Yeah, it was about having developing question asking, particularly around when feeling lost or overwhelmed or confused. You know, the times where, especially with students, where people are like, well, everyone else gets it, so I would just be stupid to ask a question. So
I'm going to pause you.
Yep.
I'm going to have you build it, and then we're going to talk through the challenge once you've built it with your Lego bricks.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes to build the challenge you're experiencing.
Okay.
And then we're going to talk it through.
I have a lot of students who either are afraid or don't know how to ask questions, either of me or of their peers. It's not necessarily a paralysis, but for some students there can be a paralysis of just, when I'm stuck, I don't even know where to go. But for some students it's a fear of feeling stupid. I think for most students, there's just, and this is where it's like, I don't know where to place the question mark or the dot, is just they don't even know how to ask the question. So like sometimes I'll get kids who call me over and they'll start to ask, and I'm like, have you asked your table yet? And they're like, no. I'm like, great, so ask your table. And I turn to walk away. And especially in the beginning of the year, there's this like face of panic of like, but how? Because a lot of times with me, they feel okay not really knowing how to name their question. They're okay rambling with me, and then I, as a professional, I'm able to tease out that question. But I don't know if it's not, I know it's not a distrust of other students. I think that they do trust that the kids who get it will be able to give an answer, like that there are people in the class that know the answer. But there's so that's one group of students, and then there's some students who, like I said, just when they don't know, they just sit there. And if I or my co-teacher don't go over, they could literally sit for an hour and do absolutely nothing.
When you think of us wrapping up our Lego build, what would be most helpful in our conversation to help you overcome?
I have no idea.
Okay, put another way, what are you hoping will be different as a result of our conversation?
Maybe some different. Right now, one of my one of my go-to lines is, "Have you asked your table yet?" And if the whole table is done, if the answer is yes, I'll often just ask someone else at the table, so what was their question, right? That's sort of as like a quick check. But if the whole table is stuck, what's my next question, I guess? Or if one person is stuck, what I hope is different. I guess some other tools besides just asking, have you asked your table yet? Might be a tool or a outcome.
Okay. So today you're doing a little bit of a redirecting. Hey, have you asked your table?
Yeah.
And that works sometimes.
Works usually. Yeah.
But for the students that doesn't help, you're really feeling like you're leaving them in the dust.
Yeah, then they just sit there And then eventually, usually me or my co-teacher will be like, okay, now we just go help that individual instead of them seeking help for themselves. Well, I guess they did seek help, they asked, but
Okay.
yeah.
So let's start with what you did build. Walk
Okay.
us through.
So they're kind of metaphorical, but we're gonna go with it.
Well, it's Lego Serious Play. We're all about metaphor.
I've got a podium.
Okay.
I've got a megaphone.
Okay.
I've got a mirror. Those are the eyes, this person's eyes looking back at them, and this mirror has an exclamation point instead of a question mark.
Okay.
And then I've got a flower.
Okay. So you said they're all metaphorical.
Yeah.
So
So
tell
the
us.
so the podium is the podium and megaphone are kind of similar, but different access points to similar things. So my voice can be louder, and people from wide and far or whatever can hear my voice, and it matters enough that someone hears my voice.
Can I pause you for a second? Here's your voice.
My
or
as a
here's
student.
theirs? Okay.
As a student.
Okay, so the student would have a megaphone in that case, and that would amplify their voice.
Yes.
Okay.
Podium is kind of a similar thing where we think of podiums as first, second place podium. So this is, I guess, amplify voice. This is my voice is first place, right? So like the idea of it says good things.
Mm.
So it's not just loud, but it says good things. The mirror with the exclamation point is the number of times that students check in with me because of lack of confidence, and what they're saying is actually completely correct. Maybe, again, as they ramble, maybe their sentence isn't exactly phrased, but like the ideas are completely correct. They just lack confidence. And so sometimes when they then have nowhere to go, I'm like, remember how yesterday you told me you didn't know, but you did know? So like today, do you actually not know, or do you know? That I don't know, that conversation has literally happened, but like that kind of idea. So like being able to look and be like, I may actually know. Like I have an exclamation point inside of me.
So it could be a lack of confidence. It could be learned helplessness.
It could be. Yeah.
Okay.
And then the flower is the idea of feeling good about yourself. One can be very confident about, like, I know how to do this thing, but that doesn't mean that they feel very good about themselves. So they may be very good at calculations, but that doesn't mean that they aren't feeling depressed or feeling like they have no friends in the class, or feeling like the only thing they're good at is this thing, but all the, like, they're bad at all the other things. And so the idea of just liking who you are then plays out in how you then experience everything else.
Yeah. Might have a little less fear. Might feel a little less vulnerable.
I don't know about less fear, but maybe less vulnerable.
Okay. So you've built your student here some really great tools and assets. And there is this line here between them and the actual tools. So how are you going to get your student these tools? Okay, so you just opened the door. How are you going to do that in your classroom?
So I was also thinking of the podium as being a step, was another thing that I had thought.
Yeah, you made a joke about the ladder, and
Yeah.
but you didn't actually put the ladder in. What made you hold back from putting the ladder in?
A ladder is a climbing up or down,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm looking for a lateral.
Explain the difference so I make sure I am following.
I still want them to be themselves.
Okay.
And a ladder climbing up has its own metaphorical symbolism, and climbing down has its own metaphorical symbolism. So if I'm already working in the metaphorical world,
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking more for, like, I don't know, like in the video games where you call up your tool, right? So like, I don't know, maybe in our metaphorical world, this is sitting here,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, and this now is a tool that can go call something, and so now they have it inside, or something. I don't know.
Okay.
But something I don't want them to be climbing out of the question, right? The idea is that they can not feel trapped by it, that they can feel like they can name it, that they can ask it. So it's not about coming out of it, it's about forming it.
Okay.
And a ladder brings them out of it, but doesn't form it.
Okay. So what would their question look like, or their relationship to this question, if they had formed it, as opposed to being trapped by it?
That's where I started from.
Yeah.
Is that, my goodness, with Lego arms, you also have to change like every direction and everything.
It's a challenge. You're trying to get them through a challenge too.
I bent this little Lego brick over. There we go.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier when we were talking about values that in your classroom it's just you. Sometimes there's a co-teacher, but
Well, that's part of where the collaboration piece comes into.
okay.
Yeah.
So from your previous build where you were talking about values and collaboration, and now that you're in here, what are you building for your Lego person here?
My collaboration tower.
Your collaboration tower, okay. And so how would your collaboration tower help you in this?
But this again goes back to like the kid who doesn't even want to ask their table. But if we're doing it that way, then here's my collaboration tower. How do I get steps? There we go, steps.
Tell me, for some of the kids who don't even want to ask the question, and you've been a teacher for over 10 years, what are some things that have worked?
One-on-one.
One-on-one. Okay, and in our conversation here, we are trying to get out of the one-on-one.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have to get these, according to what you have shared here, we need to get these resources into this question.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to pause you for a second, challenge you as the coach here for a moment. How is this becoming a limiting belief for you that is preventing you from giving your students what they need?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Sometimes when we think of our challenges,
Mhm.
it's part of what we want to do with our hands-on thinking is see them from above. It helps us realize there's a limit in how we've been thinking about something.
Mm-hmm.
So as you are looking at this, you've got these resources that you would love to deliver to them.
Mm-hmm.
They are stuck over here. And nothing is penetrating this gap so far in our conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So if we ended our conversation, you still would be giving one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
What do we need to build in this conversation to get us past one-on-one solutions and see this from another perspective?
I mean, it could be the first step is in those one-on-ones rather than working on the content, working on one of these.
Yeah, what would that look like?
I would pick one of these ones as the first.
I know you well. You just had your impish face on. What were you actually thinking in this delivery?
We get a very wide range of students, and there are some students who at present moment may not be ready for more than one-on-one.
Okay.
And that means that in my classroom, unless I or a co-teacher are staying with that group, which means that we are then not floating around to other groups, they will just sit on, like, they don't know how to invite themselves in. And as high school kids, a lot of the kids don't know how to slow down and invite someone else in. And so,
Can I pause you for a second? Because that's a really important realization in this build, is like they don't know how to invite themselves in. The other students don't necessarily know how to invite them in. And is that critical, in your opinion, to teaching in this classroom?
I think mostly the inviting others in.
Okay.
I think that's more critical than inviting yourself in. So I initially thought it was really silly when you took when we had the different people. But what's funny about it is that I can actually remember that we have the different people. Oh, I forgot what this was the bridge. And we had that, yeah. And so the fact that I could hold up and say, this person, we had the red was you, right? And so the fact that there's that tangibility then allowed us to separate it out into those two, like that visual nature to it was really nice, as opposed to me keeping in my head the names that I have in my head. And so there's like, we're talking about this, and so that hands-on was really nice and helpful. That now I have those two groups, so I don't have multiple.
Yeah.
Like 2 is a much easier thing to tackle than 4 or 6 or whatever.
And you started actually with one stuck
solo
in,
right.
And you realized that it was actually a much more complex problem.
And thinking through the if I had a wish, what would I give? Well, I know I gave metaphorical answers, then helps to think about how do I get a tangibility to those metaphorical things. And so we came up with that idea of putting stuff on the table, which I know I didn't give a high mark, but I think that's more my cynicism and not a fault of anything. And I am interested for myself to try and see, like, what would that look like, and if similar to how when I saw this as a tangible thing, right now that plan we came up with is not tangible. And so I'm very curious to see what happens if I write it out, and if I work with my co-teachers on thinking through what are some non-canned starters that are more specific to our space, and seeing, I already know it's going to be bright orange. I've already decided bright orange. I don't know why, but that geared to me. So like I'm already seeing it on the tables.
Okay.
I don't know what they say yet, but I'm seeing them on the tables, and that's a thing that I did not have before we started.
Okay. So you had a challenge. You had a very specific way that you were thinking about the challenge.
Yeah.
And in using your hands, you were able to see it from another perspective and actually break the pieces apart to see their different pieces. And while you don't have the solution because you need to go back to your co-teachers, you have something you can start to work towards.
Yeah, and I'm also interested to see, just as the tangibility of this changed how I thought about that, if part of my low confidence on these things is that I don't actually have them yet, and that I'm curious if once I have them, if that now having the tangible piece will now make me feel more confident in it. You can stay tuned and see what happens.
Stay tuned for another build to find out more what happens in the
Yeah.
physics classroom.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.